2020 certainly is a year for extremes. First, we see government go tyrannical with COVID-19, with the police being used as a hammer to enforce government edicts. And now we see violent leftist groups taking over entire sections of city blocks, kicking police out and advocating for anarchy. And the rest of America is caught somewhere in the middle. Meanwhile, many elected officials are capitulating to these hard leftist demands, including those in Congress. We'll look at what lasting impact this will have on America and what you can do about it in this episode of Activate America. TheNewAmerican.com reported last week that left-wing insurgents riding the racial unrest resulting from the death of George Floyd at the hands of a Minneapolis Police Department officer have created a 6-block cop-free zone in Seattle's downtown, which they are governing as an autonomous area following the withdrawal of law enforcement. First of all, notice the last portion of that statement. Law enforcement has withdrawn from the area. The New York Times reports that this was offered as a concession. Officers would abandon their precinct, board up the windows, and let the protesters have free rein outside. We can then only assume that the mayor ordered this to appease the rioters. Mayor Jenny Durkin, as well as the chief of police Carmen Best, ordered the police to not use tear gas against these lawless rioters after a week of clashes with the police. Mayor Durkin has been quoted as saying that she is committed to taking actual steps on policing and other reform measures, while the police chief has said her officers would take a different approach to law enforcement going forward. The New York Times also reported that Kshama Savant, a city council member affiliated with the Socialist Alternative Party, led protesters down to City Hall, holding a gathering inside the building in which she promoted her plan to tax Amazon, which is headquartered in the city. But some of those who mobilized here over race and policing have begun to worry that these broader priorities could cloud the agenda at a time when vital progress for African Americans seemed within reach. However, even the New York Times doesn't report on the overall radical leftist agenda of destroying social order, destroying the family, and setting up conditions to have more government control. So, the people of this neighborhood are getting exactly what they voted for. Leftist activists who are trying to remake local America into their own socialist utopia. And this is what we must keep in mind when police reforms are being debated in any legislative body. The debate has nothing to do with the police, with justice, or even with race relations. Revolutionaries exist to tear down lawful order, to create chaos, and many times a vacuum of power. And when there is this vacuum of power, it will be quickly replaced by others who will rush in to fill the void. Reports have surfaced that mention Antifa is recruiting gun owners within the blocks that they've taken over to serve as armed guards to keep police out, although police say they are still responding to 911 calls from within that area. Much like those days of the Occupy movement, what organization there is of these lawless rioters have created several lists of demands that range from defunding the police to outright abolition of the police and even the court system itself. Daily.com reported that the list of demands by protesters insists that imprisonment be phased out entirely, and for those arrested for marijuana and resisting arrest offenses to be released immediately. The protesters argue that all funding previously used for Seattle police should be redirected to socialized medicine, public housing and education, and naturalization services for undocumented immigrants. In terms of economics, the Post calls for degentrification of Seattle through methods such as rent control, free college, and a decentralized election process that allows working-class residents to run for office. In other words, American freedom and prosperity based on the hard work of the individual is thrown right out the window, and socialized systems are in. History is littered with the carcasses of socialists, communist, and fascist countries that have victimized the people by taking away their freedom, God-given liberties, their livelihood, and in millions of instances, their lives. There is no negotiating with these hardcore revolutionaries. They utilize the Marxist tactic of using race or class to divide the people. And if you don't agree with them, then you become part of the problem, and you're labeled as a white supremacist or some other derogatory, uncomfortable term that no one wants to have attached to them. So in the middle of these protests, state legislatures are beginning to take up police reform bills that will decimate police budgets and ultimately police numbers. The Democratic-led New York State legislature has passed a package of reform bills, and Governor Cuomo is expected to sign this package. In it, there are bills that micromanage the police, banning specific physical restraining methods, requiring loads of additional paperwork to be completed for low-level interactions, and the mandating of body cameras for all state police officers. Police unions have labeled this package as anti-police, and many states are expected to bring up their own similar bills for quick debate. The federal government is also jumping on the bandwagon with legislation that mirrors several of the demands that come from the violent left. Unfortunately, many of these Republicans are doing what they do best, immediately capitulating to the other side by using the same triggering mantra and agreeing that there is a role for the federal government to play in all of this. For example, GOP strategist Karl Rove, who rarely fails to advocate for big government solutions, wrote in the Wall Street Journal, "This work is essential because a video of Floyd on a Minneapolis street with a police officer's knee on his neck both shocked the nation's conscience and revealed systemic injustices. Americans want thoughtful reforms of law enforcement, and the GOP must help fashion these improvements or pay a heavy electoral price." For Mr. Rove and many of those that subscribe to his way of thinking, it's all about elections. It appears that he is suggesting that the GOP merely agree and give the protesters what they want. Well, here's a news flash for you, Mr. Rove. Those that want this type of change are not GOP voters. GOP voters are sick and tired of having to find the backbone that has been missing from the party for decades. Instead of capitulating to the hard left that wants to see the American way of life transitioned into another failed socialist experiment, legislators must strengthen their resolve to protect a hallmark of our American republic, our law enforcement. Where abuses do exist, they must be handled on the local level by those authorities of the communities served by the police. The federal government has no constitutional jurisdiction in trying to micromanage local police policies. For if the feds do, then it serves to pave the way for a police force that is beholden to the agenda of the federal government instead of those of the local communities. A national police force is a hallmark of tyranny, as history bears out the savage injustices that these types of police have committed at the hands of the state. What many think are systemic injustices now would pale in comparison to the type of devastation that would take place at the hands of a national police force. Early in its battle to protect America from the communist conspiracy and its influence, the John Birch Society recognized the vital role that a locally accountable police force plays in helping citizens protect themselves from not only the criminal element of society, but also the deleterious effects from an ever-widening and overreaching federal government bent on usurping more and more powers from the constitutional balance created by our founding fathers. This is why the organization rolled out its Support Your Local Police and Keep Them Independent action project decades ago. Since then, the organization has produced materials that members and supporters have used in their efforts to call attention to the dangers that threaten the special relationship that exists between local police and the citizens whom they serve. That relationship is under attack from those that want to remake America into a socialistic cog in the wheel of the New World Order. We encourage all of you to increase your local efforts in reaching out to others to reveal the truth about this attack on police. The next issue of the New American Magazine will have a cover story on this that you can share. In the meantime, we do have much more material at shopjbs.org, including a yard sign, bumper sticker, window clings, and travel mug that display your support, as well as informative article reprints, DVDs, pamphlets, coloring books for the kids, and assembled packets that you can hand out to help raise awareness. Those that help don't necessarily need to be a member of JBS. We encourage you to put together SYLP committees to help coordinate efforts of members and non-members. How this works is that a chapter can pull together a local SYLP committee. We recommend having about 8 people be on that committee, and again, these don't all have to be JBS members. Find influential police supporters in your area and ask them to be on the committee. These could be business owners, managers, professionals, or even elected officials who could approach their local business contacts and friends with SYLP materials. The whole point of the committee is to spread information and to garner local activity around keeping police independent and serving only the local communities. The police could certainly be a partner when appropriate, specifically when related community activities or events are held when the committee can participate. So head over to our SYLP action page for actions that you can take, as well as our shop page for products. Links are in the video description. And like we said in a previous video, as complicated as this situation seems to be, we can boil it down to either choosing freedom or chaos. Which will it be for you? Until next time, this is Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society saying stay active, everyone.